thank you, Hannah. And it's a real privilege to be able to speak here today, especially surrounded by all this history here coming together. It's really is very special. So thank you very much, and thank you, Jim, for making it happen, sort of thing as well. Okay, this is me. I'm an artisan member at the Royal Liverpool Golf Club. We're a sort of club in our own right. There are about 60 of us or so. We've been in existence for about just over 125 years now, and our main role is we work on the course for our membership. So that means at the moment we're doing a lot of fence painting, we're doing a lot of ball spotting. We've done that for a long time of major tournaments, and the main part of our work is we do divoting repairs on the course. So we do the sand, seed and soil in the divots, and it's through that, I've been a member for 20 odd years, I got very much involved with the course. It almost becomes part of you really once you get your hands in the soil and things. It's you get quite passionate about it and wanting to, you know, produce a course, help in a little way to produce a course that's very special. And as also part of that, I got to know a little bit about the history of the course and the club, and a fascination for John Boer, the club's most famous son. And what I hope to do today is tell you not just about his achievements, but also reveal to you a little bit about him as a person, who he was, his character, the man behind all his achievements. So that's the aim. I'll perhaps do that more towards the end. So this is the man we're talking about. What a swing. Wouldn't it be great to get in a position like that on the backswing? Look at that straight left arm there. Really fabulous. A few things that struck me about the particular photograph were three things in particular. Yes, the swing, but also what he's wearing. Old tweed jackets, woolen jackets, not great when they get wet in the rain. His grip, baseball grip there. And also, of course, the clubs he was using, the hickory clubs. I brought a couple of hickory clubs along with me tonight. I want to pass round if I could. I'm sure most of you have handled a hickory club. Many of you will have played with hickories, no doubt. If you have, it's a really magical experience. It really is. But I thought I'd pass these around because give you a feel of the sort of weapons they were using in those days. So I've got two clubs here. One is a scarneck driver. Well, not so much a driver, a scarneck club. You can see it's a bit thicker there. And it was spliced just here, the shaft, and spliced at the head. And the two were glued together and bound. And that club was one of the, well, before these came after the long nose clubs, of course. But these were used probably until the early 1890s or so. And then we have the more traditional hickory club where the actual shaft goes all the way through to the head. This has got a brassy plate, but if it wasn't there, you'd see it coming out at the end there. And it was inherently a lot stronger, of course, because it went right through the club. So there were two, and this one I'd say came into general play in the early 1890s. So there are a couple of clubs, if people wanted to have a look at those, and I'll put one here and we'll go around here. And I've also got a couple of gutty golf balls as well. This is what they were using. They would heat up Malay sap. They would put it in a mould. Sometimes the mould would have patterns on it. In the early days, they would strike the ball to give it more aerodynamic properties. So this is what they were. I'll pass one of these round here on either side to give you a feel of what it was like to play with these clubs in the early days. Not easy. It's a hard enough game as it is, doubly hard, I think, with those implements. So John Boer was born in a sleepy fishing village on the northwest tip of the Wirral Peninsula. There were about 200 to 300 fishermen living in Hoylake at the time. To the right you have the Mersey and the very successful city of Liverpool on the right there, and he was born in 1861. He was born, sorry, I've jumped ahead here. Yeah, these are some of his successes. All right, I say I'll mention these and come back to them and talk them through a little bit more. But I want to also reveal to you a little bit more about the man himself. 9 majors, we include amateurs in those, majors in those days, because the amateur game was quite significant in those days. 8-time amateur champion, and the first man to win the Open as an amateur, and an Englishman to do that. Now that was very significant in 1890. It had never happened before. It's only happened twice since Howard Hilton, Bobby Jones. And in some respects it changed the game a little bit, not as much as some of the other great players of the era and since, but it had an impact on the game. He was a 3-time Irish amateur champion, and one of the first golfers to be given the honour of membership of the R&A. So they were just some of those of his achievements. To say, I'm going to come on to him as a man later on. And then this is probably in the early 1890s. He's probably, by that stage, he would have won his Open Championship. In those days, if you were successful, you had your portrait taken, and that's the thing that was done in those days. But he was born in this hotel, which is the Royal Hotel in Hoylake. You'll see the word home there. These are actually, some of the photographs I'm going to be using are his own photographs. I was very lucky to have access to these. Very few of them have even been seen outside the club in any way. So very lucky to get access to them. And interestingly, he calls that home, which is lovely. So this is the Royal Hotel on Stanley Road in Hoylake. The hotel was owned by his father, another John Bull. And the club was founded in 1869. It was the Liverpool Golf Club at the time. It didn't get its royal assignation for a couple of years later. And it was formed when George Morris, brother of old Tom Morris, and Dr. Robert Chambers were invited down to lay out a 9-hole course on the area of land that you see in front of the hotel. It was actually owned by Lord Stanley. It was commonly used or treated as common land, but it was actually owned by Lord Stanley, and it was effectively a rabbit warren in many ways. But to the western side was a long line of sand dunes which bordered the Dee estuary. So these 2 gentlemen were invited down. They lay out a 9-hole course. It was soon to be an 18-hole course. And John Bull's father, another John Bull, being the clever businessman he was, he decided that it would be a good opportunity. Why don't I offer part of the hotel for membership for the clubhouse for the main club? Probably the area on the right-hand side there. And so for £3 a year, he rents out the space, and that becomes the first clubhouse to the Liverpool Golf Club. George Morris brings down his son in 1869, his 18-year-old son, and he stays and becomes the first professional at the club. He actually stays for 60 years and becomes a very well-respected, well-regarded professional at the club. So here are a couple of other photographs. John Bull Sr., who's running the hotel, with the early, most probably Thomas Owen Potter is one of the first secretaries of the club. I think that's him there with the club. And this is father and son here. So he's probably in his late teens, early 20s possibly. I want to take you back to this time of 1869. Johnny Ball, I call him Johnny because he's a young lad at the time. How exciting it must have been as a lad for a golf course to appear on your doorstep. All these great golfers come down. Absolutely fabulous. But what the club decided to do, which was quite clever at the time, there were a few English golf clubs around, Royal Heath, 1 or 2 in London, one in Manchester, Westward Ho, one or two others, but no club of a significance in England at that time. So what the club decided to do, they decided to lay on a grand tournament. And they invite all the great and good in the world of golf to come down and play on their course. They raise over £100 as prize money, and that's a major amount of money, far, far more than was ever offered for the Open Championship. And these great players come down, stay in the hotel. So you've got players like Old Tom, Young Tom, Davy Straff, Bob Martin, Jamie Anderson, the Parks, the Kokodies, all come down and they play in this grand tournament. By this stage, young Johnny Boer had been playing a little bit. He was 10, 11. And the day before the grand tournament is the Cheshire Boys Championship. And he takes part, and lo and behold, he wins. Quite exciting for a young lad. The following day, he goes out, he must have gone out and watched these great players play. And who should win? But of course, this man. We all know him, young Tom Morris. By this stage, he's a 3-time Open champion. He's the owner of the championship belt. And what could be better for the Royal Liverpool Golf Club than to have the best player in the world to win your first major tournament? And for this young lad, Johnny Boer, to have watched and have won the day before in his own competition, absolutely fabulous. From excitement to disaster, because within a couple of years, his mother dies. He's 12 years old. He's got 3 sisters. He's an only lad, and he's got a very business-minded father. What effect that would have had on him? Well, we can guess. We don't know. What we do know is that he certainly throws himself into his golf. Because at the age of 14, he's playing against the best player in the club, John Dunn. He's beating him off scratch. And at the same age, he's playing in a 4-ball record show. He plays in a 4-ball with Davy Straff against Arthur Molesworth and Old Tom. Now, Old Tom we know he was a well-travelled man. Certainly was. He may have come down to see his nephew, Jack Morris, possibly. He may have befriended John Bull's father, runs the hotel. We know he played in the grand tournament. He may well have come down to witness and play with this young talent. We don't know, but we certainly know he played in this match. At the same time, Johnny Boer, we still call him Johnny Boer, he's only 14 at this stage, but he's obviously doing very well. His grandfather is a farmer, and he starts working on his grandfather's farm. So he's a fit young lad. He's quite successful with his golf, and he's a cross-country runner. He's a footballer. He's doing well. We know the fact that he was a farmer because the 1881 and 1891 censuses record him as being a farmer. So, by the age of 16, he decides to enter the Open Championship. And he travels up to Prestwick in 1878 to play in the Open up there. So he travels up with Jack Morris, the professional. At the time, Prestwick is only a 12-hole course. They play 3 rounds there. And he plays with this gentleman. Many of you will know him. He was an ex-acrobat. He was the professional at North Berwick. He was playing in his first Open Championship as well. He was a club maker. He became a very, very successful club maker. And he's only 5'3" tall, but he is Ben Sayers. So the two of them play together, and John Bull does very well. He comes joint 4th. And in those days, in money positions, which that was, they played off for that money. And the following day, he plays off against Bob Martin for that money. He doesn't win, effectively comes fifth, but he still earns himself £1. Quite a lot of money for a young lad in those days. It would have cost him a bit to travel up from Liverpool, probably the first time he'd ever been out of the Wirral, Cheshire, 7-hour train journey, but £1 is quite a lot of money. By this stage, he's getting quite a lot of applause, as it were, from within the main club. They think this chap is doing well. He's a young farmer. People start to think of him as very much their own man, as it were. And he's doing well. He's winning almost every competition within the club. The autumn medals, spring medals. He's doing extremely well. And he gets quite a following. So much so that they think, well, maybe this lad is, this chap is really going places. He's off +7. He's winning matches at Royal Liverpool, and he's been made a member of the main club at the age of 18. And they think, well, maybe he's going to go places. And there's talk that he's probably one of the best. And a certain individual is recorded in the papers of saying that he believes he is the greatest amateur in the world today. Now, that person was one of the most revered golfers of the day. He was a Scot. It was old Tom Morris. Now, for a Scot to say that of his stature of an Englishman at that time, whoa. You know, imagine how the Scots would have reacted to that, and that sort of, a challenge, isn't it, in many ways? And the supporters, his Johnny Ball supporters, I don't think it's anything to do with Johnny Ball himself. So, but he's quite good. What then happens, of course, there's a challenge is put up, and Scotland decide to put forward who they believe is their greatest amateur at the time, and that was this chap here, Douglas Rowland. He is a stonemason from Ely, Earl's Ferry, and they play off in a home and away match. John Ball is absolutely trounced. He doesn't come anyway. They even play another match the following day back at Hoylake, and he's beaten again. So maybe the Scots are beginning to think, well, who do they think this chap is? He's, he really hasn't proven anything, has he? But then, how do you decide who is the best amateur golfer? We know, if we think about the game that at the time, you had the professional game and you had the amateur game. In some respects, they were quite different in the type of people that played the games. The professional was the club maker, the ball maker, the keeper of the greens, most likely. They gave lessons. The successful players played in challenge matches for money. They were hard-nosed people. Amateurs were in some ways quite different because they were moneyed people. They played the game for fun. They didn't have to make a living out of the game. They were doctors, they were lawyers, they were in the army or whatever it might be. And they played the game more for fun. They were also the more literate of people. They were the people that wrote in the Scotsman, the Times, the Illustrated Dramatic Sporting News. They spoke about it because they could. They talked about the game, and the amateur game was important in those days in their eyes. Who deems what's important? But anyway, the Royal Liverpool Golf Club, again thinking forwardly, decide, well, actually, how do we decide who is the best amateur? We can't just have a challenge match. We'll create the first amateur championship. And in 1885, they create the first amateur championship. But then someone pipes up in the local papers and said, hang on here, John Ball ain't an amateur. He just won, a few years back, he's won £1. He's a professional. Well, maybe he was. Maybe he was a professional. But then the club, clever as they were, look into it carefully and discover that actually there's no proper definition of what an amateur is. So what do? They create their own definition. And they decide that an amateur is somebody who hasn't earned any money from the game apart from within the last couple of years. John Boer had won his pound about 7 years earlier. Surprise, surprise, he's able to take part. This chap here, Douglas Rowland, he had won money more recently. He wasn't allowed to take place. So it's all politics, isn't it, in a different guise. So what they do, the club decide to write off to the most significant clubs around in Scotland and England and to put forward their best amateur player to come down and compete in 1885. And sure enough, they come down and they stay and they raise a fair amount of money again, but this time just for expenses. And in 1885, the first amateur championship takes place. Obviously, the club are hoping that their young son will win it. John Ball comes up against this chap in the third round, Horace Hutchinson. Now, we've talked about the differences of amateurs and professionals and different types of amateurs and things like that. This chap is most definitely an amateur. He's an Oxford graduate. He's an army general. He becomes a very well-read and well-written man about the game, certainly later on. Edits the Badminton Library and all sorts of other books. John Ball is still a farmer. He draws him in the semi-final, but he loses against him. And he then plays off, Horace Hutchinson plays off in the final against a local man, member of the club, Alan McPhee, and it's Alan McPhee who wins what was later to be recognised as the first amateur championship. The following year, it travels up to St Andrews. We're talking 1886, and this gentleman is the chap who wins it, Johnny Laidley, the best amateur of the day, certainly up in Scotland, and now of that particular time. The following year, it comes back to Hoylake again, and it's our man, Horace Hutchinson, who he meets in the semi-final. Standing on the 16th tee, John Ball is one up. The crowd's around him, he swings his drive back, crack, his driver breaks, snaps. Somehow he manages to halve that hole, but he loses the next two, and Horace Hutchinson wins and goes on the following day to win the amateur championship of 1887. 3 amateur championships, he still hasn't won. Is this guy as good as they think they all claim he is? Well, he hasn't done much yet, really, has he? 1888, the championship goes back up to Prestwick. By this stage, Prestwick is an 18-hole course. Ball gets through to the final again. Remember, amateur golf, knockout golf, 6-7 rounds you have to get through in order to win. 5 or 6, 7 rounds. That's quite some physical achievement to get through to a final and to win. It really is. Anyway, he draws Johnny Laidley in the final. It's a close run thing, but finally he wins. After the 4th attempt, he's now won his first amateur title up in Scotland. Maybe people can start to believe that he's going somewhere. Hundreds of people have travelled up from England to support him, and he's very gracious in victory. He wins a rifle as his prize. He chooses to have a rifle as his prize to shoot the rabbits back on his farm. As you do. That's 1888. 1890, the championship is back at Hoylake. Over this time, a new young person had come up through the ranks at the Royal Liverpool Golf Club, and it's this gentleman here, Harold Hilton. He's 6 years his junior. He's a slightly different type of character. He's a bit more bold, a bit more brash. His father is an marine insurance man in Liverpool. Ball draws him in the 3rd round and he fairly comfortably wins. He gets it through. The ball gets through to the final, and he wins again. For the first time, he's won now on home soil. The celebrations are phenomenal. The crowds cheer him. They carry him back to the clubhouse, and he's won his second amateur championship. A few months later, he's competing at Prestwick again for the Open Championship, and he travels up there. And by that stage, it's just a 2-round competition. In the first round, the leader is Andrew Kirkcuddy on 81, followed closely by his brother Hugh, Alex Simpson, and John Boer himself. In the second round, Andrew Kirkcuddy falls away a little bit. He scores an 8. Alex Simpson gets a 9. John Boer himself hits one of his balls onto the railway line. He gets an 8. But as time goes on, he pulls it together, and he starts to play extremely well. His playing partner, Campbell, drops out. He's given up. He can't cope anymore. So he's playing on his own. Now we have to think about this. This is a man who's won already 2 amateur championships, playing up in Scotland for the Open Championship. We have to think a little bit about the pressures. He's got 4 holes to go. He knows that if he gets home in 20 shots, he's won. But in those days, we're talking about 1890 now, there were no ropes really, generally speaking, to hold the crowds. Crowds just would mill around the players. There was nothing to stop anybody from just kicking the ball into the rough, giving people a bit of abuse, jostling. So it was quite a feat to, wherever you were, it was England, Scotland or whatever, people were partisan. They cheered their own. They sometimes sort of jostled their man a little bit, but he holds his own. And finally, he comes home in another 82 to win by a couple of shots. His ball drops in the last hole, the 18th, in 4. And for the first time, an amateur has won the Open Championship. The significance of that was unbelievable at the time. And an Englishman to do so, and in Scotland. At last, he had rightfully earned the praise that was lavished on him. He was extremely gracious in his victory, and in some respects, it changed people's attitudes in the world of golf at the time. An amateur could actually win the Open Championship. We're talking about 1890. Very soon after that, you have the people likes of Varden, you had Taylor initially, then Varden, you had James Braden, all these other people they were professionals. They're different, I know, in that respect. But more amateurs started entering the Open after that, and it raised the game in so many different ways. These are some of the scenes of some of the crowds. All right, I'm not sure if this may well have been, I think, at Hoylake, to be honest. This is the lawn. This is another one of his photographs. So you see the nature of how people supported the game. These were probably quite, middle-class people, possibly. You have the ladies wearing lovely hats and men with their boaters and caps or whatever. Out on the course, it was a lot tougher than that, I think. These may well have been people who were looking at who's the order of play. They may well have been betting on the game. Who knows? Here's another picture of another one of John Boer's himself, of the press, It was widely, and it was widely reported in the press, his victory. 1892, the championship moves to Royal St George's, a club that wanted to make their own mark on the game, particularly down south. No club had particularly done that down south in England. John Boer gets through to the final, as does Howard Hilton again. They have a ding-dong battle. Boer comes out the winner. He's now won his 3rd amateur championship. But that wasn't the end of the story, because a few months later, the Open Championship takes place at the first time at Muirfield. And who should win this time is Howard Hilton. Boer was actually winning after 3 rounds. At the first time, I think they'd played 4 rounds in an Open Championship. I might be wrong on that one, but Boer was leading after 3 rounds. Hilton beats him. 1894, the championship comes back to Hoylake. Boer wins again. So he's won his 4th amateur championship at Hoylake. The celebrations are wild, absolutely wild, to the point where if it could be done, they would have given a holiday to the whole of the Wirral, or. But and that was the nature of it. That those scenes about the crowds and things hopefully give you some idea, but that doesn't really fully appreciate what was going on there. Over the next few years, another gentleman starts coming into the world of amateur golf. He's a Scot, he's a soldier, he's a member of the Black Watch, he is a bagpipe player, his father is professor of mathematics at Edinburgh University. His son has already got the world record of the longest drive here at St Andrews, be it on a frosty day with a gotty ball, and his name is Freddie Tate. So this is him, well known for his driving. Yeah, absolutely, his feet, absolutely. And maybe, I say he's a member of the Black Watch, Freddie Tate, so maybe that's one of his, I don't know, compatriots really. But you can see the crowds there, and so this man has started to make a name in amateur golf. He's won the 1896 amateur at Hoylake, and the day before, in the final, he plays his bagpipes down the Market Street in Hoylake till the wee small hours, and conjures up the Scottish spirit, fabulous, and he wins. 1898 he wins again. These are the 2 of them together here. 1899, the amateur championship, moves up to Prestwick. And you've got the 2-time amateur champion, Freddie Tate, and who should he meet in the final? The 4-time amateur champion, John Boer. They're playing the Alps. Now the Alps at Prestwick, at the time, there was a long line of dunes, the Alps as it were, that they played over to hit the green. But they'd had lots of rain before then, and the bunkers were full of water. Tate plays his first shot, his second shot to the green. Ball is 1 up at this stage, so they're playing the 17th. Tate hits his ball towards the green, he comes up short, and to the groans of the crowd, he ends up in the water-filled bunker. Ball then plays his shot, and you see him standing on the steps up there. He had only done fractionally better because he had come up against the revetted face and the wet sand at the front of the bunker. He wasn't in the water. As you can see, Freddie Tate wades in, and amid cries of, "Wait till the ripples settle, Freddie, wait till he plays this astonishing shot onto the green. And the applause and the sound of the crowd didn't even die down before Boer plays his shot from almost as difficult a lie, and he gets his ball onto the green. They 2-putt for a halve in 5, so Boer is still 1 up. That shot that Tate played was probably one of the greatest shots at that time in golf, and it resounded around. And this is a painting of a photograph that was done of that. But fast forward 100 years, exactly 100 years, a certain individual was about to play the same type of shot out of the Barry Burn at Carnoustie. You know who he is? John van der Velde. I looked at 100 years, exactly 100 years. Of course, he didn't play that shot, but it went down in history. Anyway, back to the actual match itself. Ball still 1 up, but he loses the next hole. They're now all square going down the 19th. Tate was renowned for his driving, but on this occasion, Ball outdrove him. So it's Tate who plays his second to the green first. He puts his ball 20 foot from the flag. Ball then plays his shot. He puts his ball 8 foot for the flag. It's Tate to play first. Match play, of course. He plays his putt, but agonisingly, it comes up short. Ball now has his putt, 8 foot putt, to win. This is Prestwick. This is, you can see the crowds there. This is tension. And he plays, he's not the greatest of putters, Ball. He really isn't. A bit like Harry Varden, who had other problems as well with his putting. But he plays his putt. He stalks it for about a minute or so. He plays it, and it finally topples into the tin. And he wins his 5th amateur championship. And the whole crowd erupt, Scots, Englishmen, because of what a match it was. Bernard Darwin, the great writer of the day for the Times, he said it was the most prostratingly exciting match of them all. That was 1899. Within a few months, the whole world changed in golf, because unbeknownst to many people, John Ball had been volunteering in the Denbighshire Yeomanry. Freddie Tate was a professional soldier. He was a member of the Black Watch. So when out in South Africa, the Boers, the local Boers, quite understandably reacted to Britain's claims on precious metals and minerals out in South Africa, the Boer War started. Both men had gone out separately to fight for their country. This is a charger or a horse that John Ball rode. It was the money raised was from the club itself to pay for this charger. He was also given a pistol, I think, as well. And records show that John Ball rescued a man from beneath the legs of a flailing horse amid rapid enemy fire and brought him back to safety. Quite a hero in many ways. Freddie Tate, he had been injured in one of the battles earlier on. A few months later, he comes back to the front line, but sadly, he's killed, fatally wounded, and he dies in the Battle of Koenigsberg Ridge. Scotland had lost their greatest player, their most revered player, the handsome, rugged bagpipe player who epitomised the spirit of Scotland. The whole of Scotland mourned, and the world of golf stood still for a while. When Ball returns by boat and by train to Hoylake, hundreds of people are waiting from the station. The fog signals are blaring, people are waving flags, they're cheering, awaiting his carriage when he comes home. But Ball really he didn't feel he was worthy of all this. This was how war was interpreted in those days. A very jingoistic interpretation of what war was like. Actually, it was a gruesome, horrible thing. And like many people, I don't think he talked much about it. And he would rather just slunk home, really. Whilst he had been away, a certain other man had taken to the fore. Harold Hilton wins in 1900 and 1901. He wins both of those amateur championships to add to his Open Championships of 1892 and 1897 at Hoylake. Whilst the great man had been away, somebody else had been at play. Understandably, Ball didn't achieve a great deal for the next few years. We don't know quite why. Maybe it had a profound effect. I'm sure it did. But in 1907, he travels up for the amateur championship at St Andrews. These are the conditions that he had to face. Absolutely foul. Wind, rain, or whatever. But he was one of the best players of the ball into the wind. And he wins. And a few months later, he was given the honorary membership of the R&A. That was really reserved generally for princes and whatever. He's one of the first golfers to be given that honour. And that honour, I think, was given to him as much because of the man himself as it was of his achievements as well. So, you know, he's now got the 100% respect of probably world of golf, really. He had been competing for a few years in international matches. This is him second from the left. Now, to me, he looks a bit stilted. He looks uncomfortable to me there. To his left is Horace Hutchinson, Harold Hilton to his right. Back row on the left is Bernard Darwin. They all look quite relaxed, but John Ball looks a bit stiff to me. I don't know. He was a shy man. He really was a shy man. He didn't like the adulation that was put on, that was given to him. Maybe I'm reading something into that I'm not. Maybe it's just the way the photograph was taken or whatever at the moment. Who knows? In 1910, he wins again at Hoylake. All right, this is him winning at Hoylake. And then in 1912, he goes down to Westward Ho in Devon. And in a very tense final, he wins again. He's won his 8th amateur championship. He's now at the age of 50. And remember, you've got to get to 5, 6, 7 knockout rounds to win. It's not just one round or whatever. It's a physical, mental achievement to win all these knockout games. Quite something. When he comes back by train to Hoylake, again, hundreds of people are there at the station waiting for him to come home. Fog signals are blazing. The fishermen, the villagers, our club, are waiting with a carriage to whisk him home by a hand-pull carriage. Flags are waving. People are cheering. The train comes in to the station. The doors open, but there's nobody there. John Ball had got off one stop early and was walking back along the beach. He did not want the praise that was lavished on him, both as far as his, in the war, that's understandable, but as far as he really did not. He back in 1907, he ran off to try and avoid the crowds, but he was captured and put on shoulders high and carried triumphantly back to but he just didn't really want it. He last competes in 1924 at Hoylake. Again, he does quite well, but he only gets through to the 3rd round and eventually is knocked out. He does revive a little bit in the round. He was about 5 up with 7 to play, and he wins the next 3 or something. But eventually he's not. But he's an old man by this. Well, he's 63, but obviously a very good golfer. But what a lovely face, genial man, I think. Oh, say that again. Say that again. Go on, Keith.
Just like my granddad.
Sorry, just like your granddad.
Yeah.
And Keith here is distantly related to John Ball, aren't you, Keith?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. And Keith has written an amazing book called The Golfing Balls, which go through the fascinating history of your family, Sidney Ball and Tom Ball, and all who have achieved amazing things in golf. And it's been a labour of love, isn't it? And it's a great, great read. It really is. And it's so it wasn't just, well, he obviously achieved so much. John Ball then eventually retires, and he moves away to North Wales, to this place near Holywell, Clígan Iwan, and this is the house that he buys. He still plays a bit of golf at the local club, Hollywell Golf Club, and records show that he plays a couple of rounds with Harry Vardon. And he stays within at this house here. And can you just imagine the 8-time amateur champion playing with a 6-time open champion in just a lovely little round of golf, you know? And by this stage, Harry Vardon was coming towards the end of his playing days anyway, but gosh, that would have been, I'd love to have seen that. Ball on a regular basis comes back to Hoylake and he watches the tournaments that are played at Hoylake. And he comes back certainly for one tournament, I'm sure, which was the 1930 Open Championship. And as most of you know, there was a certain individual in American golf who was winning everything. I think he'd won 4 US Opens, 2 British Opens, a few amateur championships in the States, and he was vying to win all 4 majors, US Open, US Amateur, English Open, British Amateur in the same year. Of course, that was Bobby Jones. So he would have watched him play. Whether they met or not, who knows? We don't know. I'd be surprised if they do. And I think it was fitting that maybe John Ball was passing the baton on to the greatest amateur of them all, really, this chap, who was likewise about to retire as well. So I talked a lot about his successes and how he created those successes, a little bit about him, his technique, and him as a man. This was him. This was his grip, baseball grip. He had a very silky swing, extremely silky swing, very poetic, rhythmical. He was a great player of the ball into the wind. In that shot you saw in 1907, in those dreadful conditions at St Andrews, very few words were ever recorded from him, but he did say after that I played the ball just the right height for the wind. Low and hard, with a cleek, a 3-iron or whatever. And that's what you need to do to win on links golf, isn't it? We know that. He wasn't a great potter at all, like Harry Vardon, who had I think TB may have affected his potting a little bit. But Ball was a very effective player out of bunkers, but he didn't use a niblick, a wedge. He called them damn spades, you know? And he really, when the sort of the niblicks were being used a lot more, I said, oh, it's made the game is so easy. And he would open a mashie, a 5-iron, and flop it out. But there's one story, which is a very true story. In 1914, when he's playing at St Andrews, he's playing at St George's, sorry, and he's playing with 2 friends, Gutty Cairns and Sidney Fry. Sidney Fry is the well-known billiards player at the time, and Ball hits his ball into the bunker on the 3rd hole. For a long time, they've been teasing him about, why don't you use a niblick? Come on, I can do it. So they toss him a niblick, and he stands in the bunker, and he flops it out, and it goes straight in the hole. Can you imagine the ribbing that he would have got? Yeah. Oh dear. And the type of character he would have, okay, sort of thing. But it's certainly true, I think, and that's recorded in Robert Harris's book, I think, that story, because he heard it being told by one of those chaps. I've talked a lot about successes. I'll leave that just for the moment. First amateur to win the Open Championship, 8 amateur championship wins, conferred great honours by the Royal and Ancient, 3-time Irish amateur. What I'd like to put to you is this sort of statement here. For what it's worth, my view is that it's both of those. And the fact that he was given honorary membership of the RNA, and I'll quote you. Sorry. Keith. I'll quote you. Sorry, I can't sort of remember it all, so I'll quote you this. He was given honorary membership, I think, as much for him as a man as he was as a golfer. The Scotsmen at the time applauded the honour, and they said that he was. This is 1907, remember, and by this stage he had won the Open Championship. He had won 5 or whatever amateurs. They said he's the same quiet, genial, and kindly man, more disposed to listen to the accounts of others' games than to hear his own praises sung. And I think that says a lot about a genial, kindly man, but the fact that he didn't want people talking about him, he was more interested in other people. He had a very dry wit. He had this gentle grunt and grumble when things didn't go quite right. He was certainly a hero within the Boer War, without doubt, much that he wouldn't agree with that. But he was, like many other people who had fought in the Boer War and other wars, but we don't hear their stories, sadly. He had a very dogged determination. He was tenacious in match play. He would frustrate his followers he would go 3 or 4 holes down with about 5 or 6 to play. And he would suddenly wake up, better start playing, and he'd win the next year, and he'd win it on the last. But, oh gosh, he had so many people supporting him, but he would drive them to destruction. He was a very fit man. He was a great horseman. He was a great shot. But he was a very humble, modest man. And certainly in his early days, he was dedicated to his farming as well. Later, he took over with his sister, the hotel. And yeah, he was simply worshipped by thousands. He really was. And I'll leave you with one last slide, written by Bernard Darwin. So, the poetry of movement in that intangible quality of rhythm, that's his swing, isn't it? His style has never been beaten. Okay, there are players that have played since then, yeah, and there are others who you could argue, Bobby Jones as well, but in the eyes of, and interesting, he used worship because he was really worshipped by so many people, much that he would poo-poo it. He can never be. And Robert Harris, who won the 1925 Amateur Championship, said of him, he was the caviar of sport. Wow, fabulous. That's me really done. All I wanted to say is that I've written a small little book on John Boer called Hoylake Hero. If people are interested, I've got a copy there. But it's really to bring out more the man. Yes, his achievements, but I was wanting to get underneath his skin. And it's lovely to have you here, Chris, Keith, Kirsty.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming, and thank you for the opportunity to be able to talk. If anybody's got any questions, more than happy to answer them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.